Good morning. Let me ask you a question. How many of you know exactly what you need to do, but just can't get yourself to do it consistently? You set goals, you make promises, you dream big. But somehow, when it's time to follow through, when it's time to show up, you fall short. You're not lazy. You're not weak. You're human. But here's the truth. Discipline isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. It's not a character trait, it's a mental muscle. And today I want to show you how to train your brain for discipline. Because when you master discipline, you don't just change your habits, you change your life. Discipline. It's a word we all know, yet so few of us feel we've mastered. It sounds noble, it sounds strong. But for many, it feels like a burden. We set goals, we make promises to ourselves, we draw lines in the sand. This time, I'll stick with it. But somewhere between intention and action, something gets lost. Not because we're lazy, not because we lack the will, but because we haven't connected our discipline to something deeper. Discipline without purpose becomes punishment. It becomes a routine we resent, a checklist we drag ourselves through. And that's why before anything else, before building habits or routines, before talking about time management or motivation, we have to start with the question most people skip: why? Imagine a person who wakes up every morning at 5 a.m. to run. They lace up their shoes in the dark, shuffle out the door, and push their body through motion. But they hate it. Every step feels like a form of self-inflicted suffering. They do it because they think they should, because it looks good, because somewhere along the way, they were told success requires early mornings and relentless effort. But they're not connected to it. There's no emotional anchor, no meaningful reason. So one day it rains, or they sleep through their alarm, or they just get tired of forcing it, and the whole routine falls apart. Now picture someone else, a parent. Maybe they wake up at 5 a.m. too. They don't love running either, but they've signed up for a marathon. Not to prove they're fast, not for bragging rights, but because their child once said, I want to be strong like you. And in that moment, something shifted. The run stopped being about miles and minutes. It became about showing up for someone else, for legacy, for love, same action, different reason. But one sticks and the other doesn't. The difference is the why. The brain commits when the heart believes. Our brains aren't wired to respond long-term to rules or commands. They respond to meaning, to emotional clarity. When we have a compelling reason, we're willing to suffer for it. We're willing to show up when it's inconvenient. We're even willing to start over when we fail, because we're not chasing a task, we're chasing transformation. Purpose gives discipline its fuel. If you find yourself constantly starting over, constantly losing motivation, constantly frustrated with your inability to follow through, it's not because you lack discipline. It's because you're disconnected from your why. You're chasing what without ever defining why. And that disconnect is the reason so many goals remain unmet. So the question becomes, how do you find your why? You don't find it by looking at what others are doing. You don't find it in someone else's morning routine or productivity system. You don't find it in hustle quotes or motivational videos. You find it by asking, what matters most to me? What do I want my actions to say about who I am? You find it in the moments that move you, the conversations that stay with you, the causes that light something in you. That's where your why lives. When you tie discipline to identity, when your actions reflect your values, something powerful happens. You stop needing constant motivation because you're no longer dragging yourself toward a finish line. You're becoming someone aligned, someone whole. You stop seeing the hard things as obstacles and start seeing them as proof of commitment. You're not just waking up early. You're becoming a person who honors their priorities. You're not just avoiding sugar. You're becoming someone who protects their energy. You're not just finishing that project. You're becoming someone who follows through. And that identity, once rooted, is very hard to shake. That's why people who find their why tend to outlast those who only chase the what, because the what can change, goals shift, metrics move. But your why, that can grow with you. Let's be honest, discipline is hard. Life will offer you 100 reasons not to be consistent. Stress, setbacks, unexpected detours. If your only motivation is obligation, you will eventually break. But if you're anchored to a cause, if you know what you're fighting for, you become incredibly resilient. You can weather the delay in results because you trust the direction. You don't need perfection because you're committed to progress. You're not trying to win the moment, you're trying to live in alignment. And that's a much more sustainable path. You see this in athletes, in activists, in entrepreneurs, in artists. The ones who last, the ones who inspire us aren't the ones who never struggle, they're the ones who know why the struggle is worth it. They've trained their minds to see discipline not as something to endure, but as something to embrace because it brings them closer to the people they want to be. Purpose creates perseverance, and it also creates peace. Because once your actions align with your why, you stop chasing external approval. You're no longer trying to prove yourself to anyone else. You're living on purpose. And there's nothing more freeing than that. Nietzsche once said, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." That's not just a poetic quote. It's neuroscience. It's behavioral psychology. It's the reality of how humans endure. We don't survive difficulty because we're stronger or smarter. We survive because we have something to survive for. So if discipline feels impossible, if you're stuck in a loop of starting and quitting, if you're tired of breaking promises to yourself, don't start with the habit. Don't start with a to-do list. Start with the reason, dig beneath the surface. Ask yourself, why does this matter? Who am I doing this for? What legacy do I want to leave? And then let that answer become your compass. Because when you start with why, discipline stops being something you do and starts being a reflection of who you are becoming. When we think about discipline, most of us imagine willpower. We think of grit, pushing through, resisting temptation, forcing ourselves to do what we know we should even when we don't want to. But the truth is, willpower is a limited resource. It's like a battery, it drains. And once it's gone, we fall back into old patterns, not because we're weak, but because we're human. If we really want to build discipline that lasts, we have to stop thinking of it as a test of character and start thinking of it as a system. Because that's what the brain responds to: systems, not speeches. Our brains are not wired for constant decision making. They're wired for efficiency. Every time we repeat a behavior, our brain starts to automate it. It looks for patterns, for shortcuts. That's why you can brush your teeth, tie your shoes, or unlock your phone without thinking. Your brain is trying to conserve energy, so it forms habits to do the heavy lifting. It creates what we call habit loops, neurological cycles that guide most of what we do every single day. These loops follow a predictable structure: cue, routine, K, reward. It starts with a cue, something in your environment or emotional state that triggers the behavior. Then comes the routine, the action itself. Finally, there's a reward, something your brain receives that reinforces the behavior and makes you want to repeat it. Let's take something simple. You wake up, feel groggy, cute, make coffee a routine, and then feel alert and comforted, reward. Do that enough times, the loop locks in. It becomes automatic. You don't think about it, you just do it. Not because it's part of some grand plan, but because your brain is trying to simplify your life. Now here's the problem. These loops don't care if the habit is good or bad. The brain doesn't judge, it just automates. So if your cue is stress and your routine is scrolling social media and the reward is distraction or dopamine, you've now trained your brain to repeat that cycle over and over, even if it makes you feel worse in the long run. This is why discipline can feel so hard. We try to fight these loops with willpower instead of reprogramming them. We tell ourselves, don't eat the cookie, don't skip the workout, don't open TikTok again. But unless we change the structure of the habit, the cycle stays intact, and eventually it wins. Here's the shift: discipline becomes radically easier when we stop trying to overpower our habits and start designing them. Instead of relying on motivation, we build systems. Instead of forcing ourselves, we guide ourselves. We use the same structure the brain already uses, but in our favor. Start with the cue. If you want to build a habit, you need a clear and visible trigger, something that reminds your brain to act. Let's say you want to read more. If the book is buried in a drawer, the cue is hidden. But if you place it right by your pillow, your brain sees it before bed and gets the signal. Oh yeah, we read now. That visual reminder is a powerful tool. The same goes for fitness. Want to stretch in the morning, lay your yoga mat out the night before. Want to drink more water, keep a full bottle on your desk. Cues are subtle, but they are powerful doorways into action. Next comes the routine, the behavior itself. This is where most people go too big, too fast. They try to overhaul everything. I'll read a book a week. I'll work out for an hour every morning. But big changes often trigger resistance. The brain sees too much change as a threat. That's why starting small is not just easier, it's smarter. Read one page, do one pushed up, meditate for 1 minute. It may feel silly at first, but these small routines send a powerful message to your identity. I am the kind of person who does this. That identity shift is what fuels consistency. And finally, the reward. Most of us skip this step. We think that doing the thing should be enough, but your brain needs a reason to want to come back. The reward doesn't have to be extravagant. It can be a moment of satisfaction, a mental pat on the back, a cup of your favorite tea, or even checking off a box on your habit tracker. What matters is that your brain associates the action with something pleasurable or meaningful. This is how the loop gets reinforced: key, routine, reward, again and again, until the action becomes automatic. Let me give you a real-world example. A friend of mine wanted to start journaling, but every time she tried to write a full page, she felt overwhelmed and gave up. So she redesigned the loop. She placed her journal and pen next to her toothbrush écuve and committed to writing just one sentence after brushing her teeth, routine. When she finished, she would light a candle she loved, eat, reward. It became a moment of calm, not a chore. Within weeks, one sentence turned into a paragraph and then a full page. But it started with a loop her brain could embrace. What makes this approach so powerful is that it removes friction. You're not relying on self-control to remember or resist. You're building an environment that helps you succeed by default. And when your environment aligns with your values, discipline becomes easier. Not because the work is less hard, but because the resistance is less strong. We often think discipline is about intensity, but it's not. It's about consistency. And consistency is built on structure, not emotion. Emotion will rise and fall, but structure stays. If you build habits that are triggered reliably, that are easy to start, and that feel rewarding, you won't need to convince yourself every time. You'll just do it. And that's the goal, not to force discipline, but to make it natural. When you understand how habit loops work, you stop fighting your brain and start working with it. You see that discipline isn't a moral issue. It's not about being good or bad, strong or weak. It's about design. It's about clarity. It's about setting yourself up to win one loop at a time, because at the end of the day, we become what we repeat, and what we repeat is shaped by the systems we build. Discipline often gets misunderstood. When people hear the word, many think of strictness, of rigidity, of rules that choke joy out of life. It sounds like punishment, like a cold system of self-denial. That's why so many people reject it, because in their minds, discipline equals suffering. But what if that understanding is completely backward? What if discipline isn't about deprivation at all? What if it's actually about respect, deep, lasting self-respect? Too often, discipline is framed as something you have to do, something imposed upon you. It's the thing that keeps you from the cookie, from the drink, from the nap, from the party. It becomes a set of boundaries that say, no, you can't. But what if that voice of discipline isn't saying no to joy, it's saying yes to something greater? What if, instead of denial, discipline is an act of devotion to your future self? Discipline is saying yes, not to rules, but to the person you want to become. Every time you choose to act in alignment with your goals, even when it's hard, you're sending yourself a message: I matter. My future matters. My well-being matters. That's not punishment. That's love. Discipline, when it's reframed, becomes one of the most powerful expressions of self-worth we can practice. Think about the language we often use when trying to change habits. I can't eat that. I have to wake up early. I shouldn't skip the gym. It's full of resistance. It feels like we're dragging ourselves through a storm we didn't choose. But what happens when we shift that language even slightly? It becomes, I choose not to eat that because I want to feel good in my body. I get up early because I value peace and preparation. I move my body because I deserve energy and strength. That single change from obligation to choice turns effort into empowerment. There's a story I once heard about a woman who lost over 100 pounds. She was asked how she stayed consistent with such a drastic lifestyle change. She smiled and said, I stopped thinking about what I was giving up and started thinking about who I was showing up for. She wasn't doing it to be smaller. She was doing it to be stronger for her kids, for her health, for her future. That's what reframing discipline can do. It makes the hard things worth it because you're not just enduring them, you're investing through them. The problem is that society often glorifies the hustle and grit of discipline, but misses the heart of it. It's not about grinding your way through life, constantly depriving yourself. It's about having enough clarity about what matters to you that you willingly trade short-term comfort for long-term alignment. When you start to value your future self as much as your present cravings, something shifts. You stop fighting discipline and you start owning it. And this isn't just motivational fluff, it's rooted in psychology. Studies have shown that people who have a stronger connection to their future selves are more likely to save money, make healthier choices, and stick to long-term goals. When you can visualize and emotionally connect with who you're becoming, the sacrifices don't feel like losses. They feel like declarations. I am choosing this because I'm worth it. It's the same logic behind the phrase, you're what you do consistently. But we rarely complete the thought. And what you do consistently is shaped by what you believe you deserve. If deep down you believe you aren't worthy of health, success, peace, or love, you will sabotage your efforts to get there. But if you believe that your future self deserves the very best you can give, every choice becomes a way of honoring that belief. Imagine two people sitting down at dinner. One person says, I can't have dessert, I'm on a diet. The other says, I'm skipping dessert because I'm focused on feeling more energetic tomorrow. Same action, completely different energy. One is driven by external rules, the other by internal respect. The first feels restricted, the second feels aligned. That's the difference a reframe can make. And this doesn't just apply to food or fitness. It applies to how you manage your time, how you speak to yourself, how you spend your money, who you surround yourself with. Discipline touches everything. Saying no to scrolling for an hour so you can write a page in your journal. That's not restriction, it's choosing to process your thoughts and give your mind a place to breathe. Saying no to toxic relationships. That's not harsh. It's an act of self-preservation. Saying no to staying up late, watching shows you won't remember a week from now. That's not boring. It's protecting the version of you that wants to feel clear and rested. None of this means you have to be perfect. In fact, this mindset leaves room for grace. You will miss days. You will make choices you wish you hadn't. That's part of being human. But when your foundation is built on self-respect, you won't spiral into shame. You'll realign with purpose. You'll say, this moment doesn't define me, but my next choice can. The beauty of reframing discipline as self-respect is that it brings intention into every corner of your life. You become more aware of how you spend your time, how you treat your body, how you nurture your mind. You stop living reactively and start living deliberately. You realize that every act of discipline is a vote for the life you say you want. And the more votes you cast, the more real that life becomes. So the next time you find yourself thinking, I can't have that, or I shouldn't do this, try changing the language. Say instead, I choose not to because I care about who I'm becoming. Watch how that shift changes your posture, your energy, your confidence. Because now you're not being controlled, you're in control. Now, discipline isn't a prison, it's a path. And every step you take down that path is a step toward a life that feels more like yours. One of the most misunderstood parts of building discipline is the belief that you have to go big to make it count. We live in a culture that celebrates extremes, the dramatic transformation, the 5 a.m. club, the 90-day challenge. We see these stories and think that's what commitment looks like. So naturally, when we decide to change something in our own lives, we go big too. We set massive goals, jet and shape, or write a book, start a business, meditate daily for an hour. And while those goals may be noble, they're also incredibly vague and intimidating. The brain sees them not as opportunities, but as threats. They demand too much at once. They don't feel safe. And so the brain shuts down, not because you're lazy, but because it's trying to protect you from the discomfort of uncertainty and potential failure. This is where so many people get stuck. They confuse the size of the goal with the strength of their commitment. They think that if the dream is big, the effort must be big right away. But here's the truth: lasting change doesn't begin with intensity. It begins with consistency. And consistency doesn't come from leaps, it comes from steps. Small, simple, ridiculously doable steps, micro commitments. Micro commitments work because they bypass the brain's resistance. When you tell yourself you're going to run 5 miles a day after years of being inactive, your brain revolts. But if you say, I'll put on my shoes and walk for 2 minutes, your brain says, yeah, I can do that. That's the key. It doesn't feel threatening. It feels achievable. And once you start, momentum kicks in. That 2-minute walk might turn into 10. That one push-up might turn into 5. That glass of water might inspire you to skip the soda. But it all starts with something so small it feels almost silly. There's a story about a man who wanted to start flossing. He knew it was good for him. He also knew he wasn't doing it. So he made a micro commitment not to floss his teeth every night, but to floss one tooth. Just one. That was the goal. Of course, once the floss was in his hand and he'd floss one tooth, it felt ridiculous to stop there. So he flossed a second, then a third. And pretty soon, he was flossing his entire mouth nightly, not because he forced himself to, but because he'd lowered the barrier to entry so far that action became almost inevitable. That's the brilliance of micro commitments. They create wins. And those wins build confidence. More importantly, they build identity. Every time you follow through on even the tiniest commitment, you reinforce a message to yourself: I follow through. I keep my word. I take action, even when it's small. And over time, that message gets internalized. It becomes part of how you see yourself. This is why a single push-up isn't just a push-up. It's a declaration: I'm someone who moves. Writing one paragraph isn't just a paragraph. It's a statement: I'm a writer. Drinking a glass of water in the morning isn't just hydration. It's ownership. I care for my body. These micro actions may be small in scale, but they're massive in meaning, because every action is a vote for the kind of person you're becoming. And the more votes you cast, the more your identity begins to shift. That shift is the real game changer. Because when identity aligns with behavior, discipline becomes natural. You're no longer acting from a place of force. You're acting from a place of truth. You don't need to convince yourself to do the thing, because it's who you are now. That's why starting small is not about lowering the standard. It's about raising your chance of lasting change. Let's take another example. Imagine someone wants to write a novel. That's a massive goal. The idea of writing 80,000 words can be paralyzing. So instead, they commit to opening their laptop and writing 1 sentence a day. That's a 1 sentence. Some days, that's all they write. But other days, that sentence becomes a paragraph, a page, a scene. And within a few months, they've got 10,000 words, then 20,000, not because they forced it, but because they showed up in small, consistent ways. That's how real discipline is built. Not in the grand gestures, but in the quiet repetitions. It's worth noting that micro commitments also protect you from burnout. When you go all in on a big goal too quickly, you can burn out before the habit has a chance to take root. But small commitments create sustainability. They meet you where you are. They let you build capacity instead of chasing perfection. And in a world that constantly demands more, there is something profoundly freeing about doing just enough to keep moving forward and trusting that the momentum will carry you. And here's something else: micro commitments build integrity. Every time you make a promise to yourself and keep it, you strengthen the trust you have in yourself. That's a form of self-respect that no one can give you and no one can take away. You stop second guessing. You stop waiting to feel ready. You simply begin, and the act of beginning over and over again builds the muscle of belief, because in the end, discipline is not about giant leaps. It's not about punishing yourself into progress. It's about planting seeds, small ones, daily, consistently, and watching them grow, not because you forced them to, but because you nurtured them. That's the essence of micro commitments. They meet you in your humanity. They honor your limits while calling you toward your potential. They build bridges between who you are and who you're becoming. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by a goal, shrink it. Not because you're shrinking your ambition, but because you're smart enough to respect how change actually works. Begin where you are. Make it easy. Make it obvious. Make it so simple you can't say no, and then let the power of showing up again and again do the rest. There's a simple choice that most people face every day, usually without realizing it. Do I check my phone again, or do I stay focused? Do I scroll for 10 more minutes? Or do I start on the thing I said mattered? Do I eat the cookie now, or do I stick to the nutrition plan that supports my goals? These questions don't seem like much in the moment. They're so small, so ordinary. But stacked together, they shape everything. Because at the heart of each one is a deeper principle, the ability to delay gratification. Years ago, a group of researchers ran what's now known as the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. They sat young children in a room, placed a single marshmallow in front of them, and offered a deal: you can eat this now, or you can wait, and when I come back, I'll give you a second one. The catch? They had to wait 15 minutes alone with the marshmallow. Some kids caved quickly, others squirmed in their seats, covered their eyes, sang songs, anything to distract themselves. And a few made it through and got the second marshmallow. Years later, those same kids were tracked as they grew up. And the results, the ones who delayed gratification tended to have higher SAT scores, better emotional regulation, lower substance abuse, and healthier relationships. But this is about more than marshmallows. It's not really about dessert, it's about discipline. It's about what happens in the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for decision making, impulse control, and forward planning. This is your brain's discipline center. And just like a muscle, it can be trained. The more you practice choosing long-term reward over short-term pleasure, the stronger it gets. The more you say no to the easy thing and yes to the meaningful thing, the easier that choice becomes next time. Think about that. Every time you resist the urge to pick up your phone, you're not just avoiding distraction. You're strengthening the part of your brain that governs your ability to focus. Every time you walk past the junk food and make a better choice, you're not just making a health decision, you're reinforcing your identity as someone who is in control. Every time you decide to save money rather than spend impulsively, you're literally increasing the cognitive circuitry that supports patience, foresight, and discipline. It adds up because every small choice is a training session. And discipline is not something you're born with. It's something you earn through repetition. We live in a world that constantly tells us the opposite. We are sold instant access, instant comfort, instant gratification. One-click ordering, next-day delivery, infinite scrolling, autoplay. Everything is designed to make waiting feel unnecessary. But here's the paradox: the more we indulge in ease, the harder it becomes to feel fulfilled. Because real satisfaction doesn't come from what is easy. It comes from what is earned. That's why the most meaningful rewards in life are the ones you wait for, work for, and grow into. Delayed gratification is the gateway to that kind of meaning. It teaches you to prioritize values over urges, intention over impulse. It invites you to think longer term. Not just what feels good right now, but what choice today will make me proud tomorrow. That shift in perspective can change everything. Picture someone who wants to get in shape. They're tired of feeling tired. They want energy, strength, confidence. So they decide to commit to working out. Day one, the temptation is strong: skip the gym, sleep, and binge a show. But they choose to go anyway. That single act of showing up becomes a vote for their future self. The workout may not be perfect. It may not even feel good. But that's not the point. The point is that they waited. They chose the long-term reward over the short-term escape. And that choice rewires the brain, not just chemically, but cognitively. That's training. You can think of it like interest in a savings account. Every time you delay gratification, you're making a deposit into your future. You may not see it compound right away. But over time, the interest builds. Focus becomes easier. Emotional control becomes more stable. Goals feel more achievable because you're not just reacting anymore, you're leading yourself. Even in relationships, the impact is profound. Waiting to speak until you've calmed down, listening when it would be easier to argue, choosing honesty over comfort, all of that requires self-regulation. All of it is a form of delayed gratification. And when practiced consistently, it becomes the foundation of trust and maturity. The person who can delay gratification isn't just more disciplined, they're more grounded, more present, more prepared for the challenges of life. But here's the part that's often missed: the delay doesn't have to be extreme. You don't have to give up everything enjoyable in your life. You don't need to live like a monk to train this muscle. You just need to notice those small moments of choice. The micro decisions: do I check email again, or do I finish the project? Do I scroll social media, or do I call someone I love? Do I waste this hour, or do I invest it in something that builds me? Because make no mistake, discipline is an investment. And every time you delay gratification, you're depositing into the account of your future self. That future self may not be visible today, but they are counting on you. They are shaped by what you choose now. And when you finally meet them, whether it's a year from now, 5 years, 10, you will thank yourself for making those choices. And the beautiful thing is, the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. At first, it's hard. It feels like a tug of war between what you want now and what you want most. But over time, the long-term win begins to feel more rewarding than the short-term thrill. You start to crave growth. You start to enjoy the process because it's no longer about what you're giving up. It's about what you're growing into. So the next time you feel the urge to give in, to distraction, to comfort, to indulgence, pause. Ask yourself, what am I training right now? What am I strengthening? What future am I funding with this decision? You're not just choosing how to spend your time, you're choosing how to shape your brain, how to build your discipline, how to lead your life. You're not just saying no to a marshmallow. You're saying yes to becoming the kind of person who knows how to wait, who knows how to lead themselves, and who, in the end, wins not because they had more talent or more time, but because they had the strength to pause, to choose, and to wait for what truly mattered. Every day you wake up with a limited amount of decision-making power. It's not infinite. It runs out. This isn't just a theory, it's backed by neuroscience. Your brain consumes energy with every choice you make. And when that energy starts to deplete, your ability to make good decisions goes with it. That's called decision fatigue. It's why you might stick to your goals all morning and then crash into a pint of ice cream or a binge watching Spiral by evening. Not because you're weak, but because you're depleted. You've been making decisions all day, big and small, and your willpower simply wore out. One-way leaders, creators, and high performers avoid this trap is by designing their lives to reduce decisions that don't matter so they can focus on the ones that do. When Barack Obama was president, he wore only gray or blue suits. Why? Because every decision he didn't have to make about clothes was energy saved for something more important. Steve Jobs did the same thing. Mark Zuckerberg too. But this isn't about fashion. It's about